Freedom is the right to tell what they do not want to hear. CNN, MSNBC, Fox News. Tired of the same repetitive government narratives? Then wave goodbye to the distractions and rhetoric of corporate media. For this is Anti-Media Radio.
But I want to get the language right. The big government is in trouble.
You're all a bunch of slaves! Bunch of slaves!
What we need in the United States is not violence and lawlessness, but is love and wisdom and compassion toward one another.
What's your definition of meat?
And now, here's your host, S.M. Gibson.
Welcome to the Thursday, February the 5th edition of Anti-Media Radio with your host, S.M. Gibson. How's everybody doing this evening? I'm also joined in the studio tonight by our producer, Mr. Shannon Madden. How you doing?
Good evening, everybody.
All right, there's a lot going on in the news. We're going to cover the top stories of the day real quick, and then we'll get into some discussion here. Anybody that would like to call in this evening, please feel free by calling area code 718-717-8296. That's area code 718-717-8296. Okay, we've got first story up is a guy out of Pakistan. He is supposedly the leader of ISIS in Pakistan, Yusuf al-Salafi. Him and an imam are both claiming that the United States, ISIS is being funded through the United States. Salafi was captured in Pakistan. The reports say it could have been as far back as December, but it was January 22nd when Pakistan recognized that they had arrested him, and now he is saying that, they saying he is confessing that the money for ISIS is being funneled through the United States or by the United States. Also, we've got Ashton Carter, the Secretary of Defense. That story is up on the antimedia.org about his career being an advisor and working with Goldman Sachs and his connections with the military-industrial complex. And yes, he is up to become the next Secretary of Defense, and there's no hesitation. He will be confirmed, it looks like. Also, $400 million of weapons given to Yemen by the United States have gone missing. Nobody knows where they are. I know this, that $400 million of weapons are not like your keys.
I mean, can you imagine $400 million worth of weaponry? Now, do we know exactly what type of weaponry was this? Are we talking about handguns? Are we talking about assault rifles?
It was a mixture of a lot of stuff. There were
a tank and a helicopter.
Yeah, there was a mixture of everything.
Wow.
And also, that being said, drone strikes are continuing to shake Yemen right now, carried out by the United States. Also, the CIA came out and admitted that modern art was used by them to fight the Cold War, and that basically the CIA used modern art as propaganda. They're also now, the Pentagon is reporting that Putin probably has autism and or Asperger's just cause. You're not going to get autism from a flu shot, but I guess being in the KGB for 20 years.
It wasn't that long ago that we were sniffing up his butt, and now suddenly, you know, we at one point in time had a relationship with Russia, and suddenly it just, I don't know what. gone.
Yeah,
It's funny how that happened.
it is. I think the people weren't too happy over the Edward Snowden situation, plus a lot of other situations. I mean, look at the oil right now, and look what they're doing to Russia's economy and with Saudi Arabia and that whole situation.
That's and going back to that just for half a second. I mean, I thought we were all friends for a second. How do we just go from, because your friend doesn't take in a friend that you automatically, or he knows that you have a really, really horrible beef with.
Right.
Much to the point of, well, he's kind of told all the secrets to the neighborhood. You don't just take that guy in and still expect to be friends with the other
Exactly.
people, unless there was a precedent set somewhere.
Exactly.
Where that precedent had been set.
Also in the news, and I find this very hilarious, Brian Williams, Mr. NBC himself, caught lying. He got confused. He's repeatedly told a story where he was on a helicopter when he was covering the Iraqi war, and his helicopter got hit by an RPG. For those of y'all that don't know, it's a rocket-propelled grenade. Turns out, it didn't happen. He was in the helicopter behind it, and he mistakenly thought that his helicopter got hit by a grenade, but it didn't. Mistakenly, because I could see, if I was in a car and it got hit by a grenade.
Look, man, I can tell you and I can sit and go down the list of every single time I've been driving down the road and had a blowout. That is one of the most terrifying situations.
But if it was a car in front of you,
but we're talking
would you think it was you?
In a freaking helicopter, that was apparently what survived an explosion. I don't think I would ever be able to forget any and every intimate detail about that moment. That would just about jar you if you got to survive such an event.
Right. I mean,
an accident.
Right. And what's
a misunderstanding.
But
wow.
What's funny is it was a post that was on Facebook, and they were rehashing the story, and it was a story about one of the soldiers that was with him and talking about how they went to a Rangers game and they, celebrated the guy that saved him, and then in the feed of the comments, people started speaking up, saying, "Yeah, dude, I was on the helicopter and you weren't. I remember you like an hour later when y'all came up. Like, what happened up there? What happened?"
Yeah.
So, but this calls into such a bigger question. It's like, these are supposedly, this is supposedly the most trustworthy guy on TV. Really? Is he trustworthy? Like, who picks and chooses what they believe? They just openly admit that they lied. Okay, do you think Williams survives this? Do you think he keeps his job? I mean, there's a hashtag right now going along Twitter.
Well, and it's kind of strange. I mean,
making fun of the guy.
And this happened 12 years ago, which would have been shortly after the situation with, and we were talking about this earlier when we were discussing what we were going to talk about tonight, the Geraldo Rivera case when he was working for Fox News.
Yeah, remind people of that for people that don't remember. This is funny.
In Afghanistan, and it's hilarious. And please Google this, check it out on YouTube. There's plenty of footage out there on it. Geraldo was involved in the war in Afghanistan and apparently was in some sort of friendly fire situation or something. He was being fired upon, and you need to watch the footage. It's hilarious. There, everybody's ducking and crouching, and you can hear bullets pinging and so on and so forth. And we come to find out that it was staged, and the actual incident that he was referring to, that he was in the middle of, took place 300 miles away from where he was at. And, of course, he caught a little bit of flack. I think he was working for Fox, so they gave him, the weekend off to think about it.
Yeah.
And, of course, Brian Williams is going to suffer no consequences. Has offered has already went on the air and offered his apology and, oops, my bad. And
I was mistaken.
But you go back and look, and you can check out the original link. It's on YouTube of the original broadcast, and when he goes to the Ranger story, and listen to the story he tells. It's an absolute fabrication. It's not.
He's lied about it for years. He's lied about it since 2003.
Of course.
So
yeah,
he's lied about it the whole time, and but that's what media does, isn't it? I mean, what about the media can you trust? What out there to believe? Okay, let's look, for instance, off the top of my head. Sandy Hook. I remember the day of Sandy Hook. There's a shooter, or supposedly a shooter, running through the woods of somebody that they're trying to apprehend. They go after this guy. They've got it on camera. They're showing the whole thing. Disappeared. Never heard about it again. Never heard about it again. Also, and this is going to really lead us into what we're going to be talking about here a little bit later on, Oklahoma City. They talked about how there were unexploded bombs in the Murrah building in Oklahoma City on the news that day.
Now, wait a minute. It wasn't bombed from the inside. Everybody knows it was bombed from a truck filled with ammonia and gas. And
well,
this little
the media reported a little differently the day that it happened.
And Aryans put together with all of this, we're going to show America what white power is all about. Now, that's what happened. That's what was reported.
That's what they said, militia, the whole deal. And do you know that when McVeigh, on his death certificate, it actually listed the military as his occupation. Now, he had been out of the military for quite a number of years at that point. He had been in prison, had been out of the military supposedly way before Oklahoma City. And when he died, he was listed as military as his occupation.
Typo, man. You're looking way too into this. But we'll talk more about that later because we have a lot to talk about.
We will. Jordan is seeking retaliation, striking Syria and ISIS over the video we discussed on Tuesday night. And
I don't understand as much of the grand posturing that the current, or not our current, but our former president, G-Dub Cowboy Hat Bush. I don't understand why he didn't dress up in this little cowboy getup that the Jordanian president has. I mean, man, this guy looks tough and fierce. And he's
they were reporting that he's like going to go off to war like single-handedly, and like he's not doing any of that. None of that's happening. And Jordan came out and kind of established that. Somehow it started spreading online that this guy is just single-handedly going off to war.
And if any of you that are listening have your flag-waving, 100% patriot friends on Facebook, I'm sure you've seen this picture accompanied with some sort of flag waving. Well, good for him. I hope he kills every single one of those cow heads and blah, blah, this and this, that, and the other. And, it kind of reminds me of when we first got involved during the Bush years, not first got involved with Iraq, but the second time we got involved in the war with Iraq. And the chumminess between George Bush and Tony Blair. And Tony Blair started to adopt a lot of that same rhetoric.
Yes, Tony Blair.
The rhetoric that we're hearing from, he's even quoting Clint Eastwood, who's pretty popular right now with the movie that's out. That we've talked about extensively on the show.
One of our writers with Anti-Media, the fantastic Justin King, brought to my attention earlier that there's a petition going around online to award Chris Kyle the Medal of Honor post his life. They want to give it to him in death because of his work with PTSD victims.
Well, and also too that also,
exactly.
We also have the young man with the post-traumatic stress syndrome that shot and killed Chris Kyle.
That's correct.
His trial's coming up, which is very, very close to all of the flag waving that's been done over the film American Sniper.
The flagster baiting.
Yeah, there's been a lot of flagster baiting going on.
There has.
Yeah.
But that's all that is propaganda. That's all any of it is. So you've got to learn to decipher. You've got to learn to read through it. You've got to learn to know that when Brian Williams is telling a story, it's just that. It's a story.
Well, and if anybody ever tells you a story, always double-check the facts. And now, in this day and age, more so than ever.
For so long, they've had a monopoly on the facts. It's been just until the Internet age. And there's independent media and the Internet where the media is not being controlled by corporations, that you're actually allowed to get a narrative out there, that there's not some overseer with a bunch of money sticking money in your pockets, writing the script for you.
Absolutely.
So we're finally at a time where a real awakening can happen, because the CIA has been involved in the media for years. That's on record that the CIA has been involved. The government controls the narrative. They're going to push one thing down your throat and avoid another thing. We haven't heard one single thing about al-Salafi claiming that the funding for ISIS is coming through the U.S. Not a single word.
And the amazing thing is, too, is if you go and Google his name, very few current news stories are coming up. Very few. This is entirely underreported.
Right. I think RT picked it up for a story, but it originally got picked up in Pakistan, but it was through a subsidiary, believe it or not, of the New York Times. They printed it over there, but not a word spoken about it here. So why are they picking and choosing where to put that news and what country to put that news in? I think that's very relevant and something the American people would be very interested in, that ISIS is being funded through the United States.
You would think so. The problem is, though, is that by the time, you're going to do whatever you can.
And there's three options in that. I'll say this. There's three options. A, the guy's lying, which anything's possible. People lie every day. B, that there are members of ISIS here in this country, or not necessarily members of ISIS, but there are opposing factors to the U.S. government that are well off. Makes me think of the Bin Laden family before 9/11 when they're getting them off on the airplanes immediately later that day, but there's no fly zones everywhere. Or C, that it's probably a mixture of B and C together, C being that the government's involved as well. There's at least some knowledge from somebody somewhere in the government.
And it's definitely, it's not like America's ever funded terrorist groups before.
Right.
Have they?
No, I mean, we were talking about on Tuesday about the story with Libya and Gaddafi's son talking to Dennis Kucinich about how we were funding the terrorists in Libya. And they were going around Libya. They were getting on TV in Libya. And they were terrorizing people. But we were calling them freedom fighters. And they were killing kids and, doing the whole thing. It goes like back to Syria 2 years ago. Where they've gassed everybody. They've killed everybody. Oh, it's horrible. Can you believe this regime did it? Well, actually, it's the people we funded. I heard a absolutely fantastic story about John McCain earlier. So Ukraine has been using cluster bombs and their situation going on over there. And, it's a big no-no. You can't do that.
No.
So good old John McCain has come out and said that he believes that the United States is partly to blame for that. Can you believe the United States is taking the blame for anything? But
actually coming from John McCain. Wow.
Well, let me tell you, and this was his reasoning, and this is kind of the punchline to it. He says the United States didn't fund Ukraine well enough, and we should have given them way more weapons. And because we didn't give them a ton more weapons, then they were forced to use these cluster bombs.
Yeah.
So we should have just armed. We should just arm everybody, John McCain. That's what he's insinuating. Why don't we just give it?
And that's
which is what we're doing.
And that's America's responsibility to arm the whole entire
Police
world.
the world and give everybody guns.
And until we get to a point where we're forced to face these people in the streets, or they're using the same guns that we gave to them against us.
Yeah, I mean,
see Afghanistan.
Look, it's the old Bill Hicks skit where he's talking about Shane and Jack Palance. I mean, Bill Hicks has been dead for 15 years now, and it rings so true. Jack Palance and Shane slides the gun over. He's like, pick up the gun. He's like, oh no, mister, I don't want to pick up the gun. I don't want any trouble. I'm gonna go on my way. Pick up the gun. Pick up the gun. Oh no, leave. No, just I'm gonna go on my way now. Buy some gingham. Picks up the gun. He had a gun.
That's exactly right.
That's what we're doing. We're giving everybody all the weapons, and we can say, see, they had weapons. You had to do something about it. And the mouthpiece is Brian Williams in the media, trustworthy Brian Williams.
Mm-hmm.
I tell you, they're really going to, I don't know what they're going to have to do for damage control in this because.
He already did it. We saw.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to work because.
That's it. And you know,
there's already been a backlash. The people are speaking out and making fun of the guy, and his credibility's been shot. It don't take much, you know. And that's the thing about the American people. They'll believe all the lies. They'll believe all the lies. They'll believe all the lies. But, you know, you get caught one time, they may not believe it anymore. Now, sometimes they do.
And I think this will probably be this will be a really good spotlight to shine on what's last what's left of the old dinosaurs of broadcast television or broadcast news, which is, I mean,
does anybody watch Brian Williams?
Does anybody watch national feed broadcast news anymore? I mean, it really is. It's so redundant.
Yeah,
I can get all of the information that they stretch out and slam a bunch of medicine commercials in the middle of. I can get all of that information easily on the internet, scanning, Google News or just some generic random.
What they're going to tell you can get.
Quick little bulletin points, and that's it. And I can read it in 3 minutes and be done.
And you've been indoctrinated for the day. And
yeah, I can see a story, see something in it, and go and investigate it and look at both sides of it and actually, fully evaluate, which I really stress that everyone listening to this broadcast needs to do more often. We need to go back and we need to fact check, and we need to go back, and it doesn't take very long to do.
Right.
You can scan if you have half a lick of sense.
Anybody that's writing stories online, they should be sourcing their articles, and you can go back and research where this information is coming from. Exactly. And we encourage you to do that, even with us at Anti-Media.
And I have to applaud Anti-Media because Anti-Media is very, very, very transparent and very, quick to point out where you can receive your information from. Folks are easy to get a hold of at Anti-Media.
Yes. Anybody that ever wants to reach out to us, you can reach out to us.
Or better yet, you can call us right now and we'll talk about it right
now. 718-717-8296. So let's jump on the story we hit on a little bit earlier. I don't know how well versed you were in this story. I've known about it for a few years now. But the Oklahoma City police officer, Sergeant Terry Yankee, that's a whole can of worms. We've got a story up right now on the website, antimedia.org, that kind of gives you the overview of it, but there's so much more involved.
Well, the first thing, when we first started talking about this, and I did see the page earlier today and read through it and was absolutely floored that
Tell me since you didn't know about the story until just recently, tell me your first impression.
The first impression I have, and I always take everything that I read, again, with a grain of salt.
Right.
And so I read it, went and did a little bit of fact checking on it, found it is a much more widely publicized story than I first thought, but not widely publicized to the fact that everybody should be as upset as they were about, the 2 police officers in New York that were killed in retaliation for the Eric Garner verdict. And this is much more. Wow. I mean, that's really all I can say about it. First off, we have a man who committed suicide by attempting to slash his wrist 9 times, slash his own throat, left a pool of blood in his own car.
He was anemic.
Somehow, some way,
drug his body,
was able to drag his body all the way through a field and take a gun, put the gun to the side of his head, and put it 40 to 45 degrees above the side of his head at a 45 degree angle. And we even did this little experiment before the broadcast tonight and actually held our hands on the side of our head at that angle with of course,
meanwhile,
no gun in our hands. And it's just even with nothing in your hand, it's a very awkward position to put your hand in, much less wrap your finger around a trigger and shoot yourself in the head.
Well, what was even more impressive, about his suicide was that the coroner's report showed that his hands were bound. So his hands had been bound together. So this is how impressive Terrence Shakey was at committing suicide. I mean, he's obviously the master at committing suicide. He can tie his hands together. He can first off beat himself to death.
Yeah.
Tie his hands together. Drag himself through a field anemic. He would have.
After
He should have passed out.
slashed his
Science
wrist
says
and
he would have passed out,
slit
but
his throat.
he was
Yeah.
obviously the master of suicide. So, makes it to the tree, shoots himself, kills himself. He's dead now. But luckily, since he is such a master, his hands automatically become unbound somehow, not tied together anymore. After his death, he unties whatever was confining him, whether it was handcuffs, and then he disposes of the gun. There was no gun at the scene.
Wow.
That's the most impressive part about his suicide. That's where you really have to just applaud and say, this guy really just knew how to cover his own suicide up.
So we have to take a step back. And of course, we also have the other anecdote of the right down the road in Oklahoma City of hang on.
What was it?
You're help me here. I'm having a senior moment tonight. You have to forgive me. We stayed up late last night.
But what were you? Okay, let's see. What in Oklahoma City? Anyway.
Kenneth Trinidad.
Trinidad.
I'm sorry, I don't know why I couldn't think of his name.
Yes. Okay.
Which again, now that I've heard this story and started investigating on it and heard about Kenneth Trinidad, which you are very, very well acquainted with.
Yeah, and that's a whole different. That's a whole different can of worms right there too, and it all relates to the same story.
But at the same time, his death is kind of sort of an accident because he was mistaken for someone else.
Right. They didn't mean they did mean to kill him, but it turns out looked the wrong guy.
Yeah. He looked exactly like someone else who was familiar with Timothy McVeigh. And Timothy McVeigh even said...
reached out to Ken's brother, who was a lawyer, and told him what had happened, and his brother had been mistaken. But his brother got his body released. His brother, Ken Trinidad was in jail at the time.
Well, he was mistaken for Richard Lee Guthrie Jr., who was a suspected co-conspirator.
Right.
Who was found dead in the same fashion.
Well, that's all coincidence. I don't see anything.
Allegedly from suicide by hanging.
Well, hey, look, that's a little bit better. Was the rope missing? Did he untie himself?
I don't know. We don't, we don't know too much about that part of it. I'm sure that they would have left the rope.
But they had, Trinidad was so bad that there were symptoms of, they were beating his feet. Like it was a pro deal. Like these were professionals doing it and feeding him Coca-Cola because of the effects that it has on the body while you're torturing somebody. So anyway, his brother got him released. The prison had his brother's body, and they were going to go ahead and cremate it. His brother somehow got her released, and when he did, he saw what was a severe beating and was obviously not a suicide. So the government has gone to a lot of extremes to cover up what happened with Oklahoma City. And what's so fascinating about that to me is because of the time of when it happened, it was before the age of the internet. I was much younger than I am now, and you don't really get your head, at least me, at that time in my life, I wasn't thinking that way. And, you get the 9/11 stuff and you get certain things that have transpired since then, and you say, well, those are obvious things. And never in my mind did I think to go back and look at Oklahoma City. I was like, that probably is what that is. Never looked into it. Still, quite a few years ago now, I I really started to dive into it, and then the movie A Noble Lie came out, and that really is a really good, compact argument for what really happened. And it's not really an argument, it's just kind of presenting facts that every American should know about what happened that day and the circumstances around what happened that day. And once you get all the info, you know, people say, well, this was an inside job, this was a blah, 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 blah. Oklahoma City is by far the most obvious of any of it.
Absolutely.
The science of just the truck, of what the explosion would do, would never, ever, ever in a million years tear the front of that building down.
Yeah, and that was, I think that was my first official reaction. Now, I am a little bit older than you are, and I was, at that point in time, I was years old. But I was old enough to remember that, remember the footage very well. It was very vivid, very shocking how much destruction and damage a U-Haul truck filled with ammonium and, you know, whatever other chemicals, the fertilizer and stuff that they used to make their little concoction, how much damage was done to the front of that building. And quite frankly, I mean, and the damage was projected towards the building in such a way.
Right.
But even then, I mean, you can imagine there being some structural damage, windows out, this, that, and the other. But what we ultimately saw, though, was, I mean, gosh, I mean, it was such a violent explosion that didn't seem likely that a truck parked out on the curb X amount of feet away from
would do that kind of damage.
Parked right up against the door.
Right. Well, see, you know, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I'm a scientist, see that, and immediately go, I know exactly what happened. But I have done quite a bit of research and seen different scientific studies on it, and gone and looked at both sides of the explosion. And what that explosion would have done, it would have been compact to that area. It would have gone through the roof of the truck and affected below the truck. It would have never have reached out and taken down the top of this building.
Top
right.
of the building, yes. Absolutely right.
That's it. Scientifically, it would have never happened.
The damage pattern just didn't make sense, just like it didn't with 9/11.
Exactly. But I think, too, Oklahoma City, and I know that this isn't true because of especially things Lyndon Johnson got caught guilty of with the Gulf of Tonkin and that situation, but for my lifetime and my age, it was the first real, like, big event, like terrorism, we're going to use this for something, and Oklahoma City did not drag us into a war the way 9/11 did, but what it did do is the draft for the Patriot Act, the original Patriot Act, was drafted after the Oklahoma City bombings. Ironically, it was co-drafted by a guy, you may have heard his name before, Joe Biden.
Oh, yeah, I know that guy.
Ironically, ironically, the same man in the presidential elections, and he's, you know, being carted around, you know, whoever, I guess, whoever he's talking to, if anybody pays attention to anything Joe Biden says. But, you know, I guess he had to argue Paul Ryan a couple of years ago. Yeah, big deal. That was, yeah.
I got the DVD at home. I watch it from time to time. Yeah.
The Paul Ryan, Joe Biden exclusive.
Yeah.
Royal Rumble. Right. But,
I think Geraldo Rivera was the referee in that match.
Well, that would have been a beautiful mustache to referee it, that idiot.
Next on WWE.
So, but, okay, Biden campaigns that he's so against the Patriot Act. Oh, it's taking our rights away. It's, oh, how dare these people. How dare them pass the Patriot Act. And he thinks people woke up yet or were born yesterday, and apparently they all were because he helped draft the thing after Oklahoma City.
Yeah.
Like, nobody.
When he held it up in front of the news cameras to complain about it, he had one hand conveniently over his signature at the bottom.
Yeah,
of the
exactly.
page.
But that's where we're at in this country. You know,
Smoke and mirrors, my friend.
it absolutely is.
And to what end? To what end? And that's really, I think that's what we as Americans need to start waking up, and that's the question we need to ask. We know that it's been very well established that our government has been doing this to us for quite some time now. To what end? And I think that even, you know, I'm sure that there has to be somebody of some sort of, I don't know, somebody connected to the government that may even be listening to this broadcast right now. And if that is the case, I've got to ask, to what end? I mean, what do you hope to accomplish? The only thing that I can see is subjugation. Subjugation of one class versus another, or excuse me, one class of select people versus everybody else.
Right. And that's, you know, kind of where we're at. You know, I really don't want to go too much down the conspiracy rabbit hole here, but mentioned at the top of the show about Ashton Carter, who's about to be the new Secretary of Defense. He worked for a corporation called Global Technology Partners. Just throw this out there, take it for what you will. Global Technology Partners have formed a strong alliance, all together, friends, let's hug, let's make out, buy each other dinner, with the Rothschilds.
Ooh.
So, there's your new Secretary of Defense.
If you're going to go where the money is.
Well, there's definitely money there.
Yeah.
So, I'm not going to get into all that, but I thought that was definitely an interesting fact. Take that for what you will. Yeah, one of those. So, where does that leave us with everything? Where does that leave us? What it leaves us with is, we admittedly were told today that the media lies. Oh, he was confused. He was confused.
Didn't you see that confused look on his face when he was
confused.
apologizing?
He loves the truth.
He was even confused about what he was apologizing about.
He loves
but
the truth.
He apologized nonetheless, and that's what's important.
Because he loves the truth.
Of course. Yeah. Let's get back to the truth real quick. Let's get off this
Yeah.
lie that I told you.
I can't believe during his apology there wasn't an American flag waving on one shoulder and a picture of planes hitting the Twin Towers on the other, and him saluting right in the middle.
And had somebody not gone on Facebook, one of the
And called him
members
out.
of the military, American military that were there, and call him out on it.
I can't believe, honestly,
we would never known it was a lie.
I have to say, I cannot believe he responded to it. Mr. Nick Burnaby, how you doing? Welcome to the show.
Hey, how's it going? What are you guys talking about tonight? I hear you guys are talking about this this lying scumbag on NBC.
Yeah, we've hit on Brian Williams. We've hit on kind of quite a few topics tonight. What are your thoughts on Brian Williams and that fantastic scenario?
Well, you know, he's just one of the guys, and it's maybe just one of the times. In fact, I was looking at I saw another article. It was on commondreams.org about how, you know, this is one of his minor lies, man. This is the same guy that helped sell weapons of mass destruction in Iraq and all this crap. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is just one of the minor lies that he got caught in, which is just his little, little bullshit nostalgic story that he wanted to use to build patriotic fervor or whatever his intention was. It backfired because a couple of veterans were kind of wise to the true facts, and they were just like, no, dude, no.
Does it not shock you, though, that he responded to it? like typically, would you not think, oh, I'm above that? They're beneath me. And that he even responded, that to me does actually surprise me.
Yeah, that is pretty surprising, but it's part of the. I mean, these media outlets kind of look good when they actually come out and apologize for stuff because they
Right.
have such a bad reputation now. I don't know if you guys have seen the recent polling numbers and stuff, but like a very small percentage of people actually fully believe in everything that the media actually says. I mean, it's like, I don't know, 17% or less. I can't remember the most recent poll, but people have a very, very low confidence in a media outlet. And for a guy to come out and say, oh, yeah, I admit I messed up, like he didn't want to say, yeah, I was lying to you guys, I was mistaken and stuff. But come on, bro. I mean, we all know what really happened.
Yeah,
You
we
can
were
see it
talking-
every time. I don't know if you guys saw that other clip when he was on Letterman, but when Letterman asked him about to tell him the story, you can kind of see a little flicker in his face where he's just kind of like, oh, here we go. I gotta make sure to not fuck up the facts here. I mean, you can kind of tell that he's very uncomfortable with it, and even when he was on record, like talking about it, that one video on Letterman, man, it's really telling. If you go back and look at that, I mean, you can tell that he's getting ready to lie. And tonight, or yesterday, when he apologized, when he was on TV and like saying that he was mistaken, he had that same like, oh yeah, I'm still bullshitting you guys. Like, I'm still lying to you about this by saying that I was mistaken about it.
Well, how stupid do they think people are? Because the story is well, you get confused over time. Listen, I will tell you this. I've never been in a helicopter that I got hit by a grenade, but I guarantee you if I had, I would remember the details. And I wouldn't see it happen and think it happened to me. That would be completely two different scenarios.
Yeah, exactly. Actually have Chris McKay in the studio with me as well, and he wants to chime in on this.
Yeah, cool.
I mean, we have to look at where this reporter was getting paid from, too. We have a propaganda budget allowed in our U.S. budget. The president's allowed to spread propaganda through the U.S. media. I mean, so who is paying him to actually speak about this? And who is paying him to lie for so many years? That's the question I hope somebody finally asks this.
Well, it's the military-industrial complex. If you follow the words, follow the money. I mean, if you look at what that guy is saying, he's trying to build patriotism. He's trying to make people like, oh, what a hero.
And it's really all tied into what American Sniper just was. It's the same kind of deal. They're trying to build up people to feel good about the country and give them heroic stories.
Well, yeah, but I mean, who would be paying to promote that story? That would still be the White House to keep the war machine going.
I disagree when you say the White House. It's coming from Langley, Virginia. It's the CIA that's doing it.
The White House is being told to do it, yes.
Right. But,
yeah, correct, 100%. The puppets inside there,
Yeah.
100%. I agree.
But as far as all that goes, it's going through Langley. They're the ones that are pulling all the strings with the propaganda and that entire situation, what we're dealing with. I don't know if you heard. Did you hear, Nick, about the Ashton Carter and his global technology partners? Did you hear any of that?
Oh man, yeah, we did I edited Josh's article today on the Anti-Media about this guy. He's the new Secretary of Defense nominee for Obama, and it looks like, surprise, surprise, he has bipartisan support. But the guy is also a member of the CFR, which is the Council on Foreign Relations, and he's also worked for Goldman Sachs as well. So yeah, this guy is a total scumbag, and for the fact that he has bipartisan support just goes to show where the government's true intentions lie. I mean, they're not trying to represent us; they're obviously trying to represent. Yeah, and his other ties are into the military-industrial complex.
So here's one that Josh didn't mention in the story, and I was looking more into his background tonight, and so I don't know if you've seen this yet. Okay, Carter, he was a senior partner for a company called Global Technology Partners. Okay, and it was focused on advising investment firms, technology, defense, blah 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 blah. Okay, so that leads us to this headline from the PR Newswire. Rothschilds form strategic alliance with global technology partners.
Wow, dude.
Yep.
When was that?
back from May 31st of last year, it appears.
Oh, not long ago.
So is this guy still
No,
associated with
this was
this?
before last year.
Is he still associated with that company or?
Well, he was the senior partner of that company.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so it wasn't like he was just, some runt down on
he wasn't
the pay
mopping,
grade,
he wasn't
right?
mopping floors, working in the
Right.
bathroom. Yeah.
So yeah, that's what we're dealing with. This guy, and he's walking through. They're not. I'll sit there and watch some of it the other day, and they're just sitting there throwing softballs at him, and he's giving these dumb answers, and they're like, "Yeah, fine, that's great. Move on."
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what. It doesn't matter what. Basically, party this guy is from, because he represents the status quo, right? He's heavily tied into all of these establishment type of organizations that have been controlling a lot of what's going on behind the scenes, right? CFR, I mean, is the one that's the most visible. The CFR is the one that Hillary Clinton is part of, and Obama is probably part of. We don't know that for sure, but Bill Clinton is also a part of it. Henry Kissinger, all these guys are tied in with this stuff. So for him to be a member of that, it just goes to show, man. I mean, these guys are just throwing in their puppets. They're not, and when it actually matters. And so, like, you have a situation when, sometimes the Republicans will challenge something and it'll be this big news story and all this stuff. When it actually matters, when it's actually a guy that is a really horrible oligarch, it's like, oh, no debate, just get him in.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's
exactly. And they
if a guy is like against abortion or something, then they're going to be like, oh my God, it's the end of the world. The Republicans are going to stop they're going to shut down the government because this guy believes in abortion. It's like, oh, he believes in killing hundreds of thousands of people overseas. Oh, he's a shoo-in. You know what I mean? It's like,
exactly.
Or it's connected to the banking industry.
Well, Goldman Sachs. So we've already established that.
Yeah, well, the Rothschilds too.
Exactly. I mean, you don't really get any deeper in bed with the banking industry than Goldman Sachs and the Rothschilds.
He's nothing but evil.
So, Nick, have you kept up with the Al Salafi guy in Pakistan? Have you read much up on that yet? About he's claiming he was arrested back in December. It appears, nobody's real sure what day, but Pakistan came out on the 22nd of this month, or last month now, I guess, and said that they arrested the head member of ISIS in Pakistan. So this guy starts confessing to all this stuff, and he says, well, yeah, by the way, so all our money's coming from the United States. And it was him and an imam who were recruiting people to go to Syria and fight for ISIS, and they were getting paid, so he says, $600 per person they got recruited.
wow, dude, that's crazy.
Yeah, and this has not been touched on anywhere in the United States. Like, nobody's talking about it. That should be, like, headline news all over the world, I think.
So, like, I mean, where in the United States is he saying this money was coming from?
That's the thing. We don't know that yet. And so, it is very possible that the guy is not telling the truth. I mean, you do have to, people do lie. But at the same time, it's very, very plausible that he's telling the truth. I mean, look at what's gone on with Saudi Arabia lately. We've got King Abdullah dying, and the Joint Chiefs of Staff, they're having people write essays about how great the guy was. Meanwhile, we've got 15 and 19 hijackers from Saudi Arabia. That's all right. Don't worry about that. They're beheading people right and left. That's good. Don't worry about that. It was in every publication in the world less than a year ago that Saudi Arabia was funding ISIS. That was reported everywhere in the world. That's no big deal. This guy's a hero. Let's all write papers about how great he was.
Yeah, exactly. And then you also got the one of the suspected 9/11 guys that is going. He's now saying that the Saudis were basically funding Al Qaeda, like and the 9/11 attacks, and it goes back to the Saudi royal family too. So he's basically saying that a lot of these Saudi princes were the ones helping them finance the 9/11 attacks and a bunch of these Al Qaeda attacks, dude.
Right. And Abdullah was a prince at the time, and he would have definitely been implicated and involved in that.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't doubt that at all.
No, so here's a scenario, and I'll just throw this out there for you real quick. See what you think about this. I have heard, because if you go through the entire report of what we have from 9/11, really, Saudi Arabia is already implicated throughout the entire thing if you read it. Like, it's pretty kind of given that they're involved. What I have kind of started to deduce, and I haven't seen the 28 pages, so I don't know, is that section may or may not implicate Israel to a degree. And that's why that part was redacted. Because why would they redact Saudi Arabia when they're mentioned throughout the entire rest of the report?
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt it, man, because, Israel, Saudi Arabia, both of them are the same religion when it comes down to it. It's statism, right? It's money, it's power, it's control, and it's divide and conquer, and it's aggression. And so, of course, you see what happens in Israel. They bombed Palestine recently in Operation Protective Edge. They killed, 2,000 civilians? And then you see the aggression from Saudi Arabia in the form of ISIS, in the form of Al-Qaeda, in the form of all these different terror groups or extremist groups, whatever you want to call them. And then, the other thing they have in common is that they're both allies of the United States. And it just makes you like, what the F are we thinking? And why do we yell at people? Why do we try to get...
If you even insinuate that Israel's done anything wrong ever, they're ready just to kill you. Like, it's not just like it's France or they're our ally, whatever. If you even kind of mention a bad word about Israel, people are ready to kill you. That's scary.
Yeah, and if you say anything, then they try to paint you as an anti-Semite and stuff like that, too.
Absolutely.
These guys definitely, the polarizing effect that these guys have, it's this very radical Islam versus radical Zionism type of complex that's been kind of cooked up over there in the Middle East, because I think a lot of this violence and tension has basically been manufactured in order to make sure that they can continue to extract resources out of these places. Because you've seen what happened in Iran when they tried to nationalize the oil supplies back in the 70s, and they tried to share all in the oil proceeds with the people. Gaddafi was doing that when he got knocked out in Libya. Libya had the highest living standard of any country in Africa.
Now, had Gaddafi turned over to the dinar yet? Were had they galled gold yet, or was he about to do that?
No, it was still in like the planning stages and stuff. But what they did do is they nationalized the oil, man, and that's no good for these corporations. They can't have that, because then they'd actually have to pay the people that live there for the resources that they're extracting, and that's exactly what happened in Iran, man, and that's why I think the U.S. adopted this kind of strategy instead of actually striving for peace and democracy, like legitimately, because if they did, they wouldn't be allies of Israel or Saudi Arabia. So we all know that's bogus. That's just a veneer over top of the real agenda. But I think they pursue this kind of polarizing policy just to keep these divided factions fighting, so that there's never this kind of unity, this kind of idea where they can actually take those resources back and say, no, hell no, it's our shit. You're not taking it unless you really want to pay a fair price for it.
Right.
That's not in the interest of corporate imperialism, man. And that's what our country really, our empire is a very corporate empire. I mean, which empire in the past hasn't really been a corporate empire? Even back in the Romans, I mean, those guys were very much all about resources as well, too. So it's always been that same way. And that's what we've realized over there in the Middle East, being that that's where we know for sure there is a shitload of resources. So they adopted this very aggressive foreign policy over there, because they have to make sure that these resources are never put into jeopardy. They have to keep these countries destabilized and constantly in a state of battle. Otherwise, the people may unite and start kicking these, the system out. They might kick the petrodollar out. We're starting to see that in some countries. Some countries are too big for us to go in and play around with. Like, Iraq was small enough, Libya was small enough. But I mean, if a country like Brazil decided to do it and join BRICS like they've done, then that's a little bit of a different scenario. When you start to see an alliance like India, Brazil, China, Russia, and South Africa all in one alliance, those guys can actually challenge the petrodollar.
Well, I
and
think
that's
too,
what we're starting to see. People are starting to get tired of the U.S. empire. They're starting to get tired of the dollar hegemony, and they're starting to have reactions. And that's what we're creating, man. But what we are creating from this imperialism is a radicalized population all around the world of a bunch of countries that are gonna fucking hate us one day if they don't already do, and so that's one thing that I was really concerned about, like traveling recently in the Mexico and stuff, is like, dude, we got a bad rep, man, and it's because of our government mostly. They do a lot of shit around the world, and it pisses a lot of people off. And does it helps the average American out, kind of, because we're in this bubble, the fact that we're still a reserve currency of the world, the dollar is still a reserve, we're in a bubble, and so it does in a way improve our quality of life while at the same time holding us down. But for people around the world, man, they don't get to enjoy that. And they think of us as pretty much assholes. And so our government's making a bad name for us. And that's another thing that Americans should be pissed off about.
Oh, absolutely. Living in our world, we're just going to watch Chris Kyle movies all day and the Kardashians and talk about deflated footballs. But it's funny because what we talk about, is the strongest, like, all this radicalized, Islamic culture that we talk about. It's so heavily ingrained in Saudi Arabia, but you never hear about it really from Saudi Arabia. And the Zionism and the exact other extreme is Israel. And those are the two most well-off sovereign nations on that side of the world. You never hear about those two countries going at each other. But
yeah, and
that's funny about it.
Saudi Arabia is like the most extreme, supposedly Islamic country in the world.
Right,
you would think that they would
Iran, but it's Saudi Arabia.
You would think that they'd be the most natural enemy of Israel, but I mean, these guys, for the most part, you see them working together.
Exactly.
So it doesn't. That's why, to me, this whole conflict in the Middle East, it's just a farce, man. It's just them trying to play polarizing positions in a superficial way, and unfortunately, a bunch of people have to die. But guess what? A bunch of people also get rich, and for them, it's worth it. For us, it's not.
Yeah, and that's the thing that so many people miss. They say they're fighting radical Islam. Well, the country that really actually houses this form of Islam you're talking about is friends with Israel. They're the people that supposedly want to wipe them off the planet, but they're friends with them. Iran's not going to do anything to anybody. Like, they act like Ahmadinejad, they act like these people are idiots. Like, they're just going to get chemical weapons and we're just going to start using them. Like, is that what they think? Do they think this guy's just like, I'm just going to do this? And I don't think they'll just wipe this country out if I did it.
Well, now, wait a minute. We didn't get really chummy with Pakistan until they went nuclear. Come on.
Well, as we see, ISIS has infiltrated Pakistan now. That goes back to the story we were talking about earlier.
Infiltrate, yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. They sent
another thing that should be noted, Kerry did that story a few days ago about that study that came out that showed that countries with oil were way more likely to get invaded by the U.S. and by other Western powers.
We talked about that on Tuesday, actually.
One thing that we kind of predicted here on the anti-media as far as ISIS, because if you remember, Obama was saying ISIS is like a JV team. And then all of a sudden, when they got to Erbil, which is the Kurdish oil distribution hub, all of a sudden ISIS is like, oh shit, these guys are horrible. They're killing people. They're cutting people's heads off. We got to start bombing them. So that study that came out, that recent study, reinforced that, man. That's another thing to think about.
I tell you what, thanks, Nick, for calling in. Listen to their shows.
I'ma let them know through the stereo. Yo, here we go through the stereo.